Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. This is a bitter truth session with Abhijit. And so Sat means truth, Logos means a science of study, Sattology means a study of truth, science of truth. Mythology means is true antonym. Myth means Sanskrit means a lie, fake, imagination. Mythology means a study of lie, fake, or imagination, something without the historical proofs. So in these sessions, we try to speak on freely as much as possible because within the legal framework and what we should be spoken, what should not be spoken. But at the same time, trying to tell people what is what. So without delay, let us welcome my great friend, very popular analyst, and something very insightful analysis on many things. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Vetrivel, thanks for having me.
So Abhijit, a lot of uh, issues are being created on the social media, and we see in the media and inaction of the Indian media, especially CNN International has gone berserk, BBC has gone berserk. Do you think it will have any trade impact on India in the long term or short term?
On what? On the COVID coverage?
On the COVID coverage, yeah. Will it affect the business in India? Uh,
Not really. I'll tell you why. Because I've been saying this for the last 15, 20 years. Every time India says we're becoming a global superpower and all of that, initially, I felt the need to laugh. Now, it's just a sad, pathetic joke. So everybody's seeing India for what it is, which is an enforcement deficit, pre-industrial third world country. I'm not going to use Trump's very accurate description of third world countries, but it is fairly accurate. So, it's just that entire bubble around this great future of India, etc., has just come crashing down. It doesn't change investments because everybody knows investments in India are highly problematic. Because when those investments go wrong, it takes 10, 15, 20 years to arbitrate it in the courts. And invariably, when the courts don't follow any legal precedent, you take it to international arbitration. On the last 7 occasions that international arbitration has gone against India, India has refused to implement the arbitration decisions or abide by them. So, there's a complete difference between the investment coming in and the India story. My only issue with the BBC and CNN's coverage of the India story is that India is very much a sort of clumsy little Labrador that can't really look after itself, that needs a lot of high maintenance care, etc., 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 vet visits every second a month, so on and so forth. And they tried to portray India as this Rottweiler, lean, mean fighting machine, which it was not. And in the case of the leadership, I've been saying this since day one, Modi is Daffy Duck. They portrayed him as Darth Vader. I think he's returned to the image of Daffy Duck. The problem with a lot of the liberal media is that they still want to portray him as some evil genius, because otherwise that entire set of awards and global recognition, quote unquote, that they built up trying to portray him as Darth Vader is falling apart like bricks, because everybody now realizes that narrative was wrong. There was just sheer incompetence. So it hasn't changed anything. It's just India has all the myths surrounding India, either of this great evil on the rise or of this highly competent, highly educated country on the rise. They've all fallen apart.
No, great opening remarks, Abhijit. So another point which comes to the mind in the defense responsibility of India, like you said, India always claims to become a superpower or be regional power. The American expectations have been that India takes responsibility on the globe. Even today, even in the Quad thing, India takes a responsibility in the region of influence, especially IOR, where they actually go out and send their troops out. But it has never happened. And so when somebody wants to be have a superpower ambitions, they, if they don't use their militaries, with India having the one of the largest, what is the restrictions which India has?
So remember, there was a time when we decided to do all this democracy promotion in the region, be it in Maldives, that coup in 86 or whatever it was, we thwarted the coup, in Sri Lanka to protect the Tamils from genocide, in Bangladesh again in 71 to protect people from genocide. And mind you, we did not do it in an illegal way. In every single case, we waited. I mean, the genocide went on getting worse in Bangladesh, but we waited for the Pakistan army to attack us first after we declared war. It wasn't going in under some responsibility to protect bullcrap. In Sri Lanka, again, we pressurized the government into inviting us in, and then we went in. We weren't going to go in without an invitation. In Maldives, the government sent out an SOS. After that, we went in. Now, the problem was at that time of power projection, legal power projection, not illegal. It ticked all the boxes of legality as accepted by international law. You essentially had an extremely weak economy, an economy that was tottering, excessive socialism. After India opened its market in 1991, and mind you, after that first generation of reforms, we simply haven't had any second, third, fourth generation reforms at all. It's just been floating on that one-time reform in 1991, realistically, plus some minor changes that Vajpayee made later on. What's happened since then is that India has always been very, very reluctant to exercise its power, except in a humanitarian way. So, for example, when a cyclone Nargis hit Burma and there was a huge loss of life, the British and the French were actually getting agitated because they were like, the Burmese aren't willing to accept anything. We just kept quiet. We sent helicopters. The Burmese were fine with Indian troops operating in their territory. That's a completely different kind of street cred, right? So there's a balance out here. India isn't seen as a threat by its neighbors anymore that it was seen as throughout the 80s and the 90s. Pakistan, of course, is another ball game. I mean, I'm not even going to get there because, for Pakistan, even if India sneezes, it's a biological warfare attempt at them. You literally have, if you go to Shireen Mazari's timeline, Shireen Mazari is what, the human rights minister now? Well, she was the national security advisor under Imran Khan or something like that. She's a wonderful lady. I mean, she's fantastic to talk to. She bakes amazing banana bread and things. But she actually tweeted that all the pollution that was coming out of Punjab because of crop burning that causes such high cancer rates in the rest of the Indo-Gangetic plains was an Indian conspiracy to gas chamber of Pakistanis. I kid you not. It's actually there on her timeline. You can go check. So, Pakistan's a different cup of tea. Now, the problem is, on one hand, I find this reluctance to intervene very good. The problem is it's also turned into pusillanimity. So tomorrow, if there's actually some conflagration that happens with China, the collective defense, Indian self-defense, don't question that. India will defend itself. Collective regional defense is simply not going to happen. It is not something that India has bought into. If anything, I would say that if those CATSA sanctions, the US arms sanctions that come in against India for buying the S-400 missile systems from Russia, if they happen, that will just be the death knell of whatever little we have managed to build up over the last 20, 30 years. So, it's just one of those things.
So another impact is the human rights report of the US agencies, particularly USCIRF and other human rights, and it has put a lot of pressure on Indian government.
It hasn't actually. The Indian government actually doesn't give a shit. I don't know why people don't get this. The Indian government throws a tantrum because of the publicity, because they need to keep their internet troops in check. They actually don't give a shit about US CIRF or US HRC. or the UNHRC for that matter, right? So they really don't give a damn. And if you want to understand why I say this, notice that till the US Council on International Religious Freedoms actually announced it was sending a fact-finding mission to India, the foreign ministry never bothered shooting down any of the stories factually. We were doing that on Twitter because, 99% of those stories of the Delhi riots were absolute codswallop. But, there are these self-created high priests and high priestesses of the truth coming out of India. And the Western media doesn't want to believe anything else. They've made up their mind perfectly okay, that's fine. But even their basic job of myth busting, the government doesn't do. Liaising with the government, providing briefings to embassies on the actual situation on the ground, they don't do. In fact, all the embassies here keep complaining, saying, look, dude, we don't trust your media, but then you're not giving us any information. So what do? Ultimately, when we compile our reports, when there's a riot going on, I can't send my political counselor to walk into a riot. So he has to go by media reports. Right. So there is an evidentiary standard that all diplomatic missions here follow. So it's based on that. So it's a mixture of both incompetence and basically they don't care. They think petulance is a substitute for liaising, explaining.
So, very well put it, and I think that needs to be communicated to many of these people both watching us, many of our friends in both sides, Republican as well as Democrats. The one of the things has been that in the equating, so in during the Trump era, before that, and other administrations, they stopped equating India with Pakistan, but because so many Pakistani influences, so there is a new attempt to equate Palestine issue with Kashmir, and which is happening a big time in the current administration, more and more, and so which is creating these kind of fake news. Like recently, there is a something going on in Palestine, between Palestine and Israel right now, and they're trying to equate the same thing is happening in Kashmir. What do you answer to these stories?
Look, you can create the narrative, it doesn't matter. But from all my friends in state, they do a very professional job of collating facts. So I'm not really concerned because you can have a Democratic Party narrative that comes out, but it's never actually going to change into the State Department narrative unless the president is convinced. Because understand the difference between the British intelligence system and the American intelligence system. People will tell you India inherited the British intelligence system. That is absolutely not true. India does not have an intelligence system. The British intelligence system is you keep collecting information on the ground. It then filters through and gets up in a condensed form to the leadership. In America, it's a dual-sided process. They keep collecting whatever the leadership decides is most important and needs to prioritize. They will collect more information to validate the assumptions made, which is highly problematic in my view, which is why I will always prefer, which is why you will see that the pushback in Australia and Britain against the Iraq war dossier was much, much, much stronger than it ever was in America. Right? Now, if the president takes the decision that India is now going to be put into the basket of deplorables, then that whole narrative will be weaponized. Yes.
No, very well put it. The threat perception, if you look at the recent statements by the Defense Secretary of US and also the Army Chief, Joint Defense Chief Mark Milley, and the statements, they clearly point out the US changing priorities. Like they are very much designing their foreign policy around the change military framework, which comes to China having AI and robotics and swarm of drones working against the American assets. Do you think that will result in a change in their outlook towards India to strengthen India, or do you think that will not change that?
No. See, there's several different issues that we have to separate out here. First is what the American military says publicly about China, which is always talking up the China threat so that they can get more funds for their pet projects. the reality is China simply isn't that much of a technological threat. They are ossified into a middle income economy. It's just pure economics if you look at it. 1.3 billion people in China at $10,000 per capita, opposed to Westosphere. What is Westosphere? It's that United Defense Market Alliance system where anybody can pick and match each other's technology, where every technology is open to America. So that includes Japan, South Korea, Australia, Israel, the whole of the EU, and NATO, is approximately 1.1 billion people with about $43,000 average per capita income. You're looking at a collective economic enterprise, kind of a unified defense market and defense systems market that is more than four times the size of the Chinese market. All right, that's a very similar comparison to the USA versus the USSR. So they'll do a lot of this, creating phantoms to get more money, but that's not actually true. Now you need to look at India in the center. I think India is a pygmy compared to China. I think we've already overtaken them in population, but or maybe we are. I've just given up looking at the population figures because they scare the living daylights out of me. We have a per capita income of $2,000. We're a low income economy, and with additive manufacturing and 3D printing, we're going to miss the entire industrial revolution. And the first things that additive manufacturing, 3D printing replace, it isn't going to be mobile phones. The first things that are going to be replaced are your toothbrush, light bulbs, cheap things, cheap, easy to manufacture things, which was the first step of industrialization, because you value add. Remember, initially Japanese products were laughed at before they became a byword for quality. German products were considered extremely low grade till Bismarck put in his mind and said quality, 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 and they changed the entire thinking of the people towards a quality product thing. Taiwanese products used to be laughed at. Today, nobody laughs at Taiwanese products anymore. So, you have to start off small, which India has not. So even our entry point will go. We will skip industrialization, this wave of industrialization. And, the problem with additive manufacturing when it comes in is that it is going to completely wipe out any avenue for industrialization that India has. So India is going to be the perpetual has been, the backwater, the irrelevance of history. Sad but true. It is what it is. And, you can't leapfrog. You'll keep hearing government ministers say, we're going to leapfrog into the information age. Let me give you two European examples. Why is it that southern Italy, even though northern Italy is one of the most productive, high income per capita, high income areas of Europe, why is it that southern Italy has never been able to leapfrog into the information age? Because remember, at one point of time, southern Italy was the rich Italy. It hadn't been devastated by the Napoleonic Wars and all of that. And it was the southern agricultural surpluses that industrialized northern Italy. And now, of course, the north resents the south because it has to keep transferring wealth to maintain the south. And the south refuses to industrialize. Why? Because they never moved north. They never moved and started working in industries and things like that north. They still have a criminalized economy in that sense. So it's very, very difficult to industrialize the south. On the other hand, you look at Belgium. Belgium, you have the Flemish north and the Walloon, the French-speaking south. And what happens out there is all the manufacturing, the sort of manufacturing revolution industries, coal, steel, all of that is in the south. But the workforce was all the Flemish workforce from the north. And because they all worked here, they understood what the industrial culture is. They now leapfrogged into the information age, and they now resent the South for being poorer. They no longer want to subsidize the South, even though the South industrialized. So India is in that stage where if you take comparative industrialization, the industrialization of this country is impossible. The information ageization of this economy is impossible to such an extent that most Americans don't even want to talk to an Indian BPO worker. The back office workers, Indian workers are the worst in solving your problems. Which is why a lot of those BPO offices, they're moving to the Philippines and places like that, where people understand what you're saying and try to solve your problems.
No, you said it right on the BPO side, because the cultural differences are too many, and also the quality of service is also lacking. You're absolutely right there, and I have said it 4 years back when I used to run a huge BPO in India. Now the another point which comes to the mind, and I think I am repeating that question which you did last time also, and repeating that question for a reason, uh, because India always seeks technology transfer, and people wonder whether India has been an innovative economy in the past ancestrally, given the numbers and given the science which was there in 1930s and 1940s and 1950s also to some extent. But after that, it suddenly lost its way all the way down. And today, we first look for technology transfer to gain parity. Do you think that's the right model for Indian innovation industry to work when India doesn't even have their own data center?
No, it's not. And all these arguments that you hear the Indian government make, they are not arguments, they are deflections. Like the IPR on vaccines. See, IPR, intellectual property rights, are very important in incentivizing businesses to develop new products. On the other hand, there is proof that IPR can actually be counter competitive at times. For example, to give you an American example, when the Wright brothers invented flight, they stitched down all the intellectual property, all the patents for the engine, for the wing form, for everything, so much that American aviation simply could not develop till the First World War. When the Americans entered the First World War, when American pilots went to Europe, they had to use French fighters to fight because the Wright brothers had basically wrapped up all the patents. Right? Now, there is a competitive logic, yes. On the other hand, what is India saying today? You need to relax IPR patents on vaccines. There's absolutely no proof. In fact, there is a lot of proof to suggest otherwise, that a loosening of patents is neither going to reduce the cost, because actually the royalties are nothing. It's the royalties that Indian companies pay to the Americans is something like $2-3, something like that, per vial of vaccine. $2. That's it. We still have to sell it at $6-7 out here because of production inefficiencies and things like that, plus the need to invest in expanding the production. It also does nothing for expanding the production of the vaccine, which is entirely because couldn't happen in India because of price controls. And we're diverting from government incompetence. So when we say technology transfer, all my friends who have invented new technology products in India, they have all left this country and gone to America. Okay, the American military actually runs an incubator program where they look at these guys and they're like, oh my God, you're really good, come over to America. Anyway, you learn about 10, 15 times what the Indian government will give you, and they're not going to think twice. They're going to go. Because the Indian government, what they do is they try everything possible to screw you over. That's number two. So, you don't have this highly enlightened society producing a lot of brains. It's just proportionate to a country of 1.3 billion people that you will have a lot of geniuses in said country. Number three is the education system. The British had a quality education system only meant for the elites in the cities, which then, produced a lot of really great minds. It was almost like a South African apartheid system, you could say that, but not race-based, more class-based, class apartheid. What happens after that, especially after the 90s, is you had all the quality institutions swamped with quantity, and the entire caliber of education has gone to the dogs. So there is no quality institution left in India anymore, not even the IITs anymore, right? So there's even the inputs going into what little excellence you are producing have dissipated. And what intelligence you see in America of Indians is purely sheer dumb luck. It's just sheer statistics, like I said, that 1.3 billion people are going to produce a reasonable amount of fairly intelligent folks. So the fourth point here is on technology transfer. See, technology transfer is one ecosystem to another ecosystem. It's not just technical drawings. Because, in the 70s, when Boeing produced a plane, Boeing would produce about 70 to 80% of that plane. Maybe if you go to the 50s and 60s, Boeing would probably produce 90 to 95% of the plane. In this day and age, Boeing doesn't produce more than 15 to 20% of their plane. The remaining 80% gets produced by lots of MSMEs all across the world, micro, medium, small sector companies all across the world, which then gets integrated because of global supply chains. And it's much more economical, and because of small, there's a saying we have in war: big victories are the sum of a lot of small victories. So big technology leaps are actually the sum of a lot of small technology leaps. That is what you see happening with technology in America. So in order, when that technology gets transferred, you need to have an extremely rich industrial ecosystem of micro, medium, and small enterprises, where all those technologies get transferred, which you can't because there's patent regimes. So first of all, it can't happen anymore. Second, it's used as an excuse because they know full well that it can't happen and you can't even absorb it. If technology gets transferred, understand this: you cannot absorb more than 10 to 15% of the technology, number one. And number two, if you get that technology, given our absolutely crap shit operational security that we have, the Chinese will have all their drawings. If you want China to get hands on your technical drawings, just give it to India.
I mean, so well put it. Your statement on intelligence doesn't exist in India is a kind of, I agree with you, even though I'm not much aware of India. I've been out of India for a very long time. I'm not aware, but I totally agree. Just to give you an example, when the COVID-19 struck USA, then American President Trump banned and scanned every single Chinese ship or plane coming to United States. And whereas in India, even today, I was seeing some media requesting Chinese cargo flight ban to be removed and also expanded. So and we can see the result. America has most probably controlled COVID-19, but India has not been able to. So do you think that it is a good thing to always claim how free we are and without worrying about protecting our own people, especially people of India, and then to claim a brownie point in terms of the world eyes, how good we are, how broad we are? Sometimes we have to be selfish. If I'm not healthy, I cannot take care of my family. That's my dharma.
So this is the classic Indian thing. We are the people who live in the gutter but look down on the rest of the world. You literally be lying in an open defecation gutter and you'll watch that rich man pass you in a Rolls Royce and say, "Who are you? Look at me." This is a classic Indian mentality. There's nothing we can do about it. Unfortunately, it's become a cultural trait now, right? It's a pity. We used to be a great civilization once upon a time, but what have we done in the recent past to deserve any of the brownie points of being a great civilization once? It's like saying, Egypt should be a permanent member of the Security Council today because 4,500 years back, they built the pyramids. So there's this constant thing that, we constantly, our calling cards are that we are free and democratic, which is true, but understand what that freedom is. A lack of enforcement and a lack of the state monopoly on security, on violence, sorry, not security. So actually, we are democratic because the state refuses to protect its own people. There is no physical security net for 99% of the people. There is no health or social security net for them. So they're on their own. And the social contract in India is you are free to say what you want because we can't protect you from people trying to kill you and rape you. We can't really provide you with an education. If you get sick, we really can't do much for you. Uh, if you go bankrupt, there's nothing we can do for you. You can just commit suicide from, a desperation. That's the social contract.
Last question. We are very much moved by what is going on in India, in the US, and I was just on a call with the American Physical Physicians Association just now, and we are sending a lot of aid to India. But the problem we are seeing in many parts of India is hoarding, and and laws are not protecting what aid is being sent to India. And where is the what are we missing right now?
Look, the government has ceased to function. They're still taxing oxygen cylinders and critical medication coming in. So, it's just, again, the government has just disappeared. We don't know where they are. Nobody knows where any minister is. Nobody knows where the prime minister is. Nobody knows where the health minister is, except for one or two tweets they put out. They've just scooted. First sign of trouble, they've run. This used to be a joke made about France, that the main reason that the Channel Tunnel was built was that so that every time France got invaded, the leadership used to pack up and run to London. This was to make that London run easier. Our leadership is like that. For the first time in history, when you're struck with a tragedy of this scale, they've just scooted. No sign of them at all. Abandoned, run. But the medicine situation has stabilized, more or less. The oxygen situation has absolutely stabilized, especially after the central government threatened to do an audit of oxygen in Delhi. So the moment they threatened to audit the oxygen supplies just miraculously. Nobody is seeking oxygen right now. For the last 3 days, everybody we have tried to find oxygen for, we have found it with just 1-2 calls most. It's more a question of coordination now. There isn't the actual shortages we were seeing. And this was always the case, remember, because India is actually a surplus oxygen producer. It's just that we didn't have the transport mechanisms and canisters, the bulk transport mechanisms, and then the forward transport mechanisms. That is now stabilized. Delhi is getting all the oxygen it needs. Medicines, there are occasional shortages here and there. The problem also seems to be that doctors are significantly over-prescribing medication that does not seem to work. The point is, you can't second guess a doctor. Just because you've decided that remdesivir doesn't work or toximulab does not work, doesn't mean that you get to interfere. Government can't interfere in medical decisions between patient and doctor. It's the doctor's call to decide that, and you have to provide those medicines. They are over prescribing it, but that is their prerogative. They've got ultimately the life of the patient is their responsibility. It's their course of medicine you have to follow. But even that is more or less stabilizing. The shortage in Delhi right now and across India from the looks of it is that of blood plasma. Now, again, the general consensus seems to be that blood plasma taken from somebody who has recovered from COVID in the last 120 to 14 days doesn't really do anything, but for whatever reasons, the doctors are going on recommending it. Now, see the pattern out here? What the government should have done was it should have started collecting statistics on what was the percentage of cases in which remdesivir wasn't working, toximulab wasn't working, or blood transfusions weren't working, and what were the treatments that were working. We have zilch. So there's no transfusion of best practices happening at the moment from a centralized advisory system, number one. Number two, when there were oxygen and medical shortages, the government did jack shit. They just disappeared. We had to, all of us, you look at our Twitter timelines, we're desperately trying to connect sources with the patient. By hook, by crook, whatever. That should be our job. And there's this huge fixation with apps. They think apps solve problems. Apps don't solve problems. Apps, the good thing about apps is they actually highlight that the person designing the app doesn't know jack shit, or the government doesn't know jack shit, because they actually highlight human incompetence in a much, much more significant way, which is what they've been doing. So for the last 3 weeks, the government wasn't willing to match oxygen supplies to supply and demand. They weren't willing to match medical supply and demand. They're just absent. They've abandoned us. Like the French government in exile during the Second World War, they've just taken the Channel Tunnel and run.
It gives me another topic for next week's discussion. I know your time is up and you have to go somewhere. But thank you, viewers, for watching it live. And The Bitter Truth next week, same time. Do join us. And next week, if we have all the permissions, then we're going to make it live on YouTube also. So please do join the top chat.
Veil, Vetrivel, thank you for being here. And please remember, India is not malignant. It is just fantastically incompetent.
Namaskar. Thank you.